Welcome to the MMHP in the 989. Channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history from the city by the bay. And now, here's your host, Scott Baker.
Back here at Studio 163 in Essexville for the almost July 1st tomorrow. We're heating up in this little canister room we're in here, and we haven't been podcasting in about a month. And Dr. J, how's things going? You just got on the return.
Just got back from New Jersey. It's been kind of an exciting week. The Bay Area Chamber of Commerce just had a ribbon cutting event for the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame at the Historical Museum of Bay County. And I got something in the works that might really be cool. Mike Murray, who runs the Delta Planetarium, has talked to me about developing kind of a multimedia light rock show thing for the planetarium. You know, kind of partnering with the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
really sounds. You know, they've got some really high tech equipment at the planetarium, much better than what we have at the museum. So that sounds real exciting. We're going to start maybe working on it second week in July, and it's probably going to be a project. It's going to take maybe a year or two to put something together on the scale that he's talking about. But he's got a lot of experience doing these types of things. So it sounds like it might be really, really cool.
Wow. That is awesome. That's a whole other... This all just came about. I mean...
Just happened. So.
Oh, my gosh. How was Jersey?
Yeah, it was great. We didn't do a whole lot. You know, it's still a little iffy riding on the trains into New York City.
Yeah.
Didn't you go to some doo-wop?
Oh, I did a doo-wop thing there, kind of DJing it.
How did you get involved with that?
Well, it all came from the Frankie Lyman Tombstone and those doo-wop organizations out there. Doo-wop is still really big on the East Coast. Surprising because, you know, doo-wop thing in Michigan, you know, people would know what you're talking about. But so that was a lot of fun. You know, I just brought a lot of kind of obscure Michigan stuff. And if I go back again, I might just do obscure Motown next time. And
wow.
You know,
We saw
that was
that
a lot of fun. We did see Darlene Love.
Yeah, she did.
You know, she was awesome. You know, 81 years old and still kicking it big time. And she looks great.
Was little Steven in the band with her?
No, but they played a couple songs from her new album that Steven Van Zandt is producing. He produced the one before this as well. But she did a song that Elvis Costello had written for her. It was a great song, and one that Springsteen had written for her.
Oh, man.
So, you know, and then played the old Phil Spector stuff. You know.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
She's a treat. I saw her last on TV on that last album thing with little Steven and the backing band, and Elvis Costello, I think, was in that show too. He wrote on her last record as well. Well, how you doing, Sir Fred? How you been?
I've been pretty good, actually.
Yeah?
Did my first gig for a while last Saturday.
Oh, yeah?
On the other side of the state, which was fun, but just can't play like I used to.
What gig was it?
Well, it was called, it's a private party, but it's called the Creek Fest. It's in Newaygo.
Okay.
The other side.
So how's
East side, Mike.
How's the book coming? Are you getting
the
close?
book is coming. It's coming. I go in spurts, man. And I'm not in that spurt right now.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's hard to get into that groove again to write, you know.
Well, but when I do,
once you do, then you're right back into it again.
Right.
But,
I was there a few days ago, but in the last few days, just don't feel it.
Yeah, it's been muggy, warm, and strange. It's that summertime mid-Michigan thing. I got you. How you been, Mike Beatty?
Doing great.
I see that you've been out and about documenting all the band stuff.
Seeking new music.
Yeah.
New musicians.
Wonderful. We thank you for all you do.
There's some phenomenal musicians out there nobody knows about.
Exactly.
There's one guy, I forget his name, at BMO's. First time he ever played in front of people. Phenomenal.
Wow.
I wish I could remember his name.
Well, it's nice that we have a couple places like BMO's and Scotty's where
Yes.
people can get out there and show their wares. Yeah, it's great.
Modes has been bringing in people from out of the state, and
Yeah, and Mo's too. now.
they've really brought it on. This, and you know, it's been nice having you be able to go both sides of the bridge, and people are back out playing again. Now we got to get the people back out watching the music. I think this year's the thing is getting people in the venues has been different because everybody's out doing their own thing again, and it's like not really focused necessarily on the musicians around right now. Like
Well,
it
there's
used
a
to be.
lot of shows coming to Bay City. Big
There
ones.
is, yeah.
You know, that Labadee Pig gig. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, was it 4 straight nights of
Yeah.
some pretty good entertainment there. And I haven't heard anything about our Chad Cunningham's show.
Yeah, those are on sale right now.
Oh, are they? Okay,
yeah, they
'cause
got
I
me
know-
wanting to do a story on them. So
Yeah, I just hadn't seen any advertisements.
me neither. I was contacted by a state theater saying we'd like you to do the stories on them, and they found I was back writing for Route Bay City, and they said, if you don't want them, Scott, we're going to go to the Bay City Times, which used to be me anyway, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, hold on. So I got a hold of my editor, Kathy Roberts, and she's like, take them, take the stories. We'll do this. So I'm going to be covering Lone Star, the country band, Five for Fighting, is it? That show.
Yeah, there was just something on Facebook with Brian Vander Ark
And that,
kind of advertising Five for Fighting.
you know, are we doing the Rick Springfield Men at Work show? And then she said, don't forget about the Papa Chubby, the country guy. I can't remember what his name is. That's coming. He's the big one, the first night. That Chad put on. And
Uncle Cracker.
That's the
Papa
pig
Roach.
gig thing. Or that's
Papa
the
Roach is
Labadee pig roast.
Yeah, Papa Roach was the headliner.
Never heard of any of these people.
I know.
And they're big.
I know. Actually, I thought that the Labadee musicians that are coming to that are a little more popular than Papa Roach gig, you know.
Well,
So-
they're more, I think, you know, like the Guess Who. Everybody knows them.
or Winger,
Yeah.
or Uncle Cracker.
Yeah. Uncle Cracker, right?
Well, we're not gonna let this slip us by. We've been waiting 7 or 8 months for this to happen, and we're saving the big surprise. So we're gonna unveil it right now, all the way up from Detroit. Special trip, no snow on the ground, no overheated car, but all the backstory our listeners ever wanted to hear. We have the great Susie Woodman in the house. Thank you, Susie, for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're gonna dig right in, and I'm gonna let the guys. They're loaded. They're loaded up, so I'm gonna let them fire questions and have fun. I'm just
right.
gonna sit and nitpick things in between here. So thank you
quite
for
all right.
coming.
My pleasure to be here.
Okay, I got to go in the Wayback Machine here, Susie, and you know, one of the great mid-Michigan bands of the '60s was the Bossmen, and I just wonder if you could take us back. When and where did you see the Bossmen for the first time?
Well, that would have been Daniel's Den, 1964.
Boy, right when they had their first record out, then I guess, right?
Right around that time, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe just before.
and then you got into a relationship with Pete Woodman, the drummer. What did that happen kind of quickly, or was that something that?
Oh, no, I was not really the hang out with the band kind of girl. My dad was a musician, and I was all too familiar with the life of a musician. So I had no illusions. But
Okay.
I did meet Pete on New Year's Eve, 1965, and we hit it off and started to date, and I moved out of the house at 17. Children do not do that.
How old was Pete at the time?
23.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's one of the early rock and roll relationships that for our area anyway. That was
Yeah,
Pretty cool.
People talked about it.
yeah.
I remember seeing you at the Saginaw High Arthur Hill football game. You and Pete.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
And I was just, Pete was always my drumming hero. So.
He's a good player, still is.
Right.
I was just telling
Gary.
Gary, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little old age, that Pete was at the Sandbar last Saturday night.
Right.
Yep.
Mike was there.
Yep.
Oh, you went, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Where did you grow up in Saginaw? Were you close to? Did you grow up near the Den?
Yeah, we moved here when I was in the third grade. Up to that point, I had lived in New Zealand and California and Wisconsin, and we settled in Saginaw on the east side. And then, come junior high, my folks moved to the west side. So I lived at Carolina and Davenport, just down the street from the Den.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Now,
those.
by any chance, did you happen to know Deb Harden or Joe Hintz, the two girls that had the
Deb and
column,
Joe.
the Deb and Joe column in the Saginaw News?
I remember them, but I did not know them.
Okay.
Yeah.
We found also there was a lady that took over after they did, right? That was another.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Trudy or Trudy.
Yeah, there was someone
That was
else
really
who wrote
interesting.
for the Saginaw News, but that was really a groundbreaking column that they had, and they were big fans of the Bossmen.
Oh, they most certainly
So
were.
yeah, in fact,
Well,
I think-
everyone was.
yeah, well, right, and rightly so. But yeah, that was. I remember Joe Hintz is still alive, and really a nice person. And she said that was the first story they wrote.
Was about the Bossmen.
Right, and Dick Wagner was, he was a real promoter of the band. He was kind of way ahead of his time. As far as making connections with DJs, and he was good friends with the two girls, and they had stories about the Bossmen. They even have a picture they shot of Dick and his wife. They were in the back seat of the back of their heads.
Oh, that's funny. Judy and Dick.
Yeah,
Oh,
really.
wow.
Yeah. I can remember the Bossman fan club where they would take posters and put them up everywhere they could think of, promoting the band, the shows, the records.
And you said you also went to the Blue Light.
Oh yes.
How did that work? Did you go with friends, or did somebody drive you to Midland? Because that was a pretty good jaunt from where you grew up. Not like going to the Den.
But at that point in time, I was living in Freeland, so it wasn't
Oh,
bad.
okay,
Yeah,
I see.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
okay.
But, yeah, well, Pete had played at the Den at the Blue Light quite frequently. So we would go there anyhow. And then, of course, keeping track of all the great bands that came through there, the local bands as well as the internationally known bands.
Yeah, that was an interesting time where actually a teen club like the Den or the Blue Light or Band Canyon in Bay City
Band Canyon.
could actually book a national act that had, a hit on Billboard. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually saw the Byrds at the Band Canyon.
Me too. What was it?
Yeah. I actually worked behind the soda fountain because I couldn't afford the tickets, and the owner said, well, if you want to work, you can see the band.
Wow.
So I worked and saw the band.
Yeah,
That's
very
awesome.
neat. Were you involved with did you get to witness any of the recording sessions that the Bossmen did?
A number of them. I remember a session that they did in Detroit at the old Motown studios. They did some recording in Cleveland, which I went to as well. So those were pretty exciting times.
Right. What do you remember about the Pete's marijuana bust, which was such a big deal, back in, what was that, probably about 1966?
65.
65, wow. Even earlier, 65, marijuana.
65. Yeah, well, the story is particularly interesting in that it shows you just how sometimes inept the legal system can be. And I'm not painting everybody with that broad brush. I'm just saying that there are places and times when it just didn't function up to speed. So there was a musician in the Flint area whose name I will never forget but will not repeat, who had been busted multiple times for probably sale and possession. I know possession definitely. The last time he was arrested, apparently the agreement with him was that they would not prosecute if he would turn over the local dealers that he knew. Well, Pete never was and never had, quote, dealt in drugs. But this particular musician came to a club one night and asked him if he knew where he could get a dime bag. Pete says, I think I can. So he went and got the dime bag. And the story's pretty deep. I won't go into all the details except to say that one night after the den, he said to me, this person is outside and I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to go talk with him. And I waited 2 hours and he never came back. And the police from Flint had come up and arrested him
So
for
it was
sale and possession of marijuana.
It was all set up then.
It was
and
all
they were
set
just
up.
waiting for him.
Yeah, and at the end of it all, when he was leaving court, the arresting officer told Pete, well, if we knew that you were not involved in the sale, we wouldn't have even bothered with you. And the reality is they had tapped our phone and followed us for 6 to 8 months. So they knew that there was nothing going on. And then you supposedly when you're on probation, you're not supposed to leave the state without permission. He never had to see a probation officer, and we moved to California.
Wow.
And just, they were fine with it. So, yeah, just strange times, different times.
And then he left the band, or was
He was let go.
Dick Wagner?
He was let go at that point in time because they felt that the sale and possession charge was really detrimental to the band. And at that point in time, it really was.
Yeah, it was kind of a big scandal. You think of it now, and it's,
I remember
with marijuana legal and shops all over the place.
My mother, whom I hadn't spoken to in a number of months, had called me and asked me if I was addicted to goofballs. That was her terminology.
So did Pete miss out on some of the Bossmen recordings then because he was out of the band?
I don't think that he missed out on any of them. I'm trying to think of the Jim Selleck.
Right.
I think was the name of the drummer that replaced him, and I don't think he recorded any sessions with the Bossmen.
And then was it 1967? The Bossmen break up. How did Pete feel about that? Because they were really still immensely popular.
He had gone back with the band.
Right.
And
Mark Farner was with him for a while then too, wasn't he?
I think that was before the marijuana bust. I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, Farner played on Baby Boy,
Okay,
so that was their last single, right?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, so it
probably that time frame I'm not too familiar with right at the moment, but it was kind of a bittersweet thing. Dick knew he wanted to move on and do other things. Warren Keith wanted to go and work with Hank Williams Jr. He'd been offered that job. I'm not sure whether Lanny was ready to keep playing or not. And at that point in time, Pete decided it was time to do something else. So we put together our own band,
Excellent.
which was
and
the
that's-
Bean Machine.
Yeah,
The
and
Bean
that's
Machine.
Oh, okay. And this is before you go to California,
Yes.
then, right?
Weren't you doing commercials on KNX as well? Or jingles? Or,
With Jay Walker from Jay Walker and the Pedestrians. Yeah, he used to, come on, let's go do some advertisements, Susie. Okay, I show up at the studio. But that studio was my first live performance when I was 9 years old after playing for 2 weeks. I went on the...
Mine too.
Yours too?
Out on Farmer Road.
Oh, you're asking me to remember that? No, I don't remember. where it
Okay,
was.
yeah.
Yeah,
I was on some little, some kids show.
Bob Dyer's probably, because he
No.
had a kid. No, not Bob's.
I can't remember who it is, but it was called like the Neighborhood Club or something.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was Kenny Roberts, I think, was on another channel.
Yeah, that was the
But
Jumping
it seemed
Cowboy.
like it had a cowboy type of
Oh, it's themed to it?
theme.
Well,
Yeah.
he was the jumping cowboy, was that?
Kenny
Right.
Roberts, the Jumping
yeah, but
Cowboy.
he was on another station.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was on the Kenny Roberts show.
You were?
He had the bunk beds, and yeah, I was on the Kenny
Wow.
Roberts show. And all the kids sat on the bunk beds, and yeah.
And you were on Pixie's Looney Tunes? Or no, not Pixie's Looney Tunes.
No, it was Bob, whatever Bob Dyer's show
Right.
was.
He was
That- yeah.
Pixie #1, wasn't he?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
And I can just remember 2 weeks. I mean, I've been playing 2 weeks, right? I get into the middle of a song, and suddenly my mind goes blank. And my mother, who was watching it, of course, freaks out, right? She said, and all of a sudden you picked up and went on like nothing ever happened. And that still occurs frequently on the stage.
Right. Wow. That's cool. You went right into radio and you put your band together. How long did that last?
That band lasted probably about 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
And then Pete got an offer to go on the road as the drummer for the Mysterians because their drummer had been
Okay.
in a car accident.
Yeah, Eddie Serrato.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of heard a lot about that.
Yeah.
Bobby, and, you know, it's all good.
Oh, yeah. No, it was fun times. It was great, great. My favorite story. I went on the road as road manager, right? Which means I collected all the money. I was so young and so naive. So we would go to these gigs. And at the time, they were making good money for that day and age. And I'd go, and the booking agency would get 50% of the money up front, and we would collect 50% at the gig. So there I would be with my little briefcase. And I would go into the room, and I would sit down, and the owner would sit down across from me, and he'd hand me a stack of $1 bills wrapped in 50s, and sometimes there'd be $3,000 to $4,000 there, and I would sit there and count it.
Ooh.
$1 at a time. Nobody ever said anything to me. Nobody ever got mad at me. I think that my youth probably played into that cry. They were not going to rip us off.
Did you record any music during that time period with you and Pete in that band before he went with the Mysterians?
We did not.
Okay.
Did not.
Did you write your own material in that time period?
Not then.
It was covers.
Just covers.
Okay. Interesting.
Are any of those commercials you did with Jay Walker? Do you have any of those left?
I never kept copies of those, and interestingly enough, I tried to reach out to him. I can't remember the name he's going
Sonny
under.
Fox.
Sonny Fox. Yes.
Yeah, he just passed away,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Because about 5 years ago, I found some information on him online, and I reached out to him under that name, and via email, and said, just wanted to say hello. It's been many years. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Did he respond?
He did not.
I did the same thing. I tried to get in touch with him. I wanted to write something about his bands. The
Jaywalkers.
Yeah, the Jaywalkers had recorded, I don't know, three or four singles.
Oh, the
his-
Pedestrians. I'm sorry. The Pedestrians was the band.
Well, his son, Jimmy, Sally's son,
Sally's son, yeah.
looks just like him.
Oh, my. Yeah, I've never seen him.
He looks just like him.
Now, Tom Hunley, who he was the guitar player in that band, was living in the Battle Creek area, Kalamazoo area, but I've not been able to track him down. Oh.
Now, did you meet up with Rick Bozzo and Meatloaf in California?
Yes, that was... Pete was taking drum. When I tell these stories, I think sometimes people think that I'm making them up because they're just so weird. Pete was taking drum lessons at a big music store on Santa Monica Boulevard. And just down the street from the music store was a recording studio that was owned by Sonny and Cher's musical arranger. I wish I could remember his last name. I think it's Batiste, but I'm not sure. Pete's leaving from a drum lesson with his drumstick stuck in his pocket, and he's walking home because at the time our car had been repossessed. So he's walking home, and there's a young man sitting on the sidewalk in front of the recording studio, and as Pete goes past him, he said, "Are you a drummer?" Pete said, "Yeah." Kid says, "Are you any good?" Pete says, "Of course I am." The kid said, "Well, we've got a recording session going on, and our drummer's not showing up. You want to come in and play?" That was Ricky Bozzo sitting on the ground, and of course it was with Meatloaf. Mm-hmm. And I think a guitar player named, what was his name? It'll come to me later on. Anyhow.
Was that Frank Mantoya?
No, this was before Frank. The guitar player just before Frankie. And So then Pete went in and recorded, and they said, "Hey, you want to join the band?" And Pete said, "Yeah." He says, "My wife plays keyboards, but her keyboard's in hock." So they said, "Oh, we'll get it out of hock." And they paid for me to get my keyboard out of hock.
Wow.
And we moved on from there.
Now, were you called the Popcorn Blizzard right away, or did you have a different name?
It's called Meatloaf Soul.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah. And played in Huntington Beach, just down the street from the Golden Bear, regularly. And then decided that there was far more work in Michigan. So Ricky Bozzo, at the age of 14, convinced his mother he should come back with these crazy musicians from Michigan. Can you imagine your son coming up and saying, "Hey, Mom, I want to go to Michigan and play music"?
How long did you play in California before you came back to Michigan with Popcorn Blizzard?
With Meatloaf
Or
Soul.
Meatloaf Soul.
Yeah, Meatloaf Soul probably. We were only there 9 months, so it was probably 4 or 5 months
Okay.
of that 9 months. Yes.
And Meatloaf and everybody's on board to come back to Michigan.
Yeah, Meatloaf had a car, rented a trailer, and off we went.
Wow.
And, of course, Pete had a lot of connections in
Yeah.
Michigan.
Yeah, lots of connections.
Did you get a manager at that point, or were you working with a promoter to help you get gigs?
Jim Atherton did a lot of work for us. He got us a lot of gigs.
Yeah, we just had made contact with Jim
Yeah.
Atherton, and we were trying to make arrangements for him
Yeah.
to come on the show, and he had passed away suddenly. I just talked to him the day before.
Oh, my.
Yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, he and I were in touch via Facebook, and I did have a phone conversation with him a few years, before that. But yeah, that was very sad. But he was very instrumental in getting us a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm sure he had a ton of stories to tell. He worked with so many people.
He certainly did have a lot of stories to tell.
So you guys jumped in the car, got back to Michigan. Where was the home base? Saginaw?
No, Freeland.
Freeland. Okay.
Yeah, Pete's parents' home.
And Meatloaf had the car. That was the only ride you had.
That was the only ride.
And everybody still lived together at the time, or hung out together, or how did that work?
Well, we moved back with Pete's parents,
Okay.
and we were there probably about a year when something happened between Pete's mother and I call him ML. I have a hard time calling Meatloaf. So if I refer to ML, I'm talking about Meatloaf. Pete's mom and ML had a falling out, and he ended up living at Rhodeichers for a while, and then he and his then girlfriend Jill moved to a place in Saginaw, actually, an apartment. But
Do you remember how you got a line on the Shield recording studio where you did your 45?
well, that was definitely because of the Mysterians. And we figured if, they had good luck, we should try it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, had you made the contact with Jane Gerstacker at this time, who was the wife of the CEO of Dow
Yeah.
Chemical at this point?
Yes, prior to that, we had made contact with Gene, Mrs.
And
Gerstacker.
I know Rick has posted some things online, and he posted some photos of the band that were taken at the Gerstacker home.
Yes, especially that photograph in front of that huge painting that was taken out of some temple. Did you see the...
Okay.
Yeah.
And-
that was in their solarium. It was just gorgeous.
And how did that work? Did Mrs. Gerstacker just offer her house, for the photos? Or?
Yeah. We knew we had to have photos, and that was a perfect place. Did you see the one with the bearskin rug? The polar bear? That was a real polar bear rug.
And, I know we had talked before we started the broadcast, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about Mrs. Gerstacker going to see the band. And
Oh, I was telling you that she always reminded me of Phyllis Diller. She would always come out. It was hilarious, but she was a wonderful lady and was so supportive of the younger musicians in the area. She allowed her daughter to come and hang out with us. She was a really an amazing woman, and I've had a few people like that come through in my life.
Were you still the Meatloaf Soul up until that point? Or?
No, we actually plagiarized the name Popcorn Blizzard. There was if you look online, you'll see there's an album or two out of a band out of L.A. called the Popcorn Blizzard.
Oh.
And we figured we'd come back here and nobody would know if we took the name because we thought it was cool.
Okay. So it was an immediate name change as soon as you got here.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we decided as the band started to dwindle, we went through 18 guitar players in 12 months.
Whoa.
It was brutal. And finally they said, Susie, we're not hiring guitar players anymore. Thanks, guys. So then it became the Floating Circus. That's when Meatloaf put on the tuxedo.
He was like the ringmaster.
Right, and Ricky was, wore the American Indian costuming, and I was always dressed in white.
The princess,
whoever I was never sure. Although we did have family members that were elephant riders with Barnum and Bailey, so perhaps that was what I was referencing. And then Pete, of course, was the clown.
And you were gigging, down in Detroit. You played the Grandy, and
I played the Grandy, played the Hideouts, played the Crow's Nest, played Silver Bell, played many places.
All the places.
Yeah.
And is this when Mike Quattro entered the picture as
Quattro? He was doing some booking for us at that point in time as well. Yep.
Okay.
I'm laughing because I ran into him probably, I want to say 25 years ago now, and he came into a club I was playing in Grosse Pointe. I'm sitting at this beautiful grand piano with a piano bar. There went the sound.
Okay.
With a piano bar around it.
Oh.
I ran into Mike Quattro at a piano bar in Grosse Pointe where I was playing. And he sat down, and of course I recognized him right away. He hadn't changed much through the years. So I waited until my break, and then I went over and just had to introduce myself and wanted to thank you for all the work you sent our way when I was a young player starting out, and explained to him who I was. And that was all it took. The next thing, he wanted to get in touch with ML really badly. And so he kept in touch for a couple of weeks until he realized that I was not going to make that connection, and he moved on. But yeah, Mike Quattro. I had another friend who played drums with him for many years when he was a traveling musician himself.
Yeah, he had his own band there. I'm trying to think what it was called. It was Mike Quattro something.
I can't remember the drum, but I do know the drummer. The drummer's name was Bill Reyna.
All right, so then I guess I read somewhere that Meatloaf, the band broke up because Meatloaf got an offer to be in Hair on Broadway. Is that
No, that happened just after the band broke up. We had friends from the Detroit area that we had come down to see frequently play, and Pete had met them when he was working down here during his hiatus from the Bossmen. There was a band from Detroit called the Southbound Freeway, which had a small hit.
Yeah, psychedelic used car lot, right.
Yeah. And the bass player from that band, Mark Chover, they had followed us out to L.A. They had asked, when we first got out to L.A., they had asked Pete to join the band, and it was one of those things. They followed us out because we weren't going to come back to Michigan. The Southbound Freeway got offered a contract from Frank Slay, who did the Strawberry Alarm Clock. Mm-hmm. And the two brothers in the band, the day they were supposed to sign the contracts, decided to pull out. We never knew why. But shortly thereafterwards, we came home, after setting up with Meatloaf, and about a year and a half later, Mark Chover came back from L.A. and hooked up with Ted Lucas. Unless you're from Detroit, you really don't know who Ted Lucas is, but if you're a follower of the Blind Boys of Alabama, their last Grammy-winning album, I'll Find a Way, the title song was written by Ted Lucas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we moved to Detroit because Mark and Ted were putting together a band called the Horny Toads. And in that band was also a guitar player named David Levine, who was actually being groomed for first chair cellist with the DSO. I mean, it was just a strange conglomeration of personalities and immense talent. That's why we ended up moving to Detroit. So we broke the band up, and then Meatloaf and Ricky ended up going back to L.A.
And then Rick somehow ended up with the Frost, right?
He came back. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, came back to work with the Frost.
Wow.
I just picked up that Meatloaf and Stoney remaster with the whole backstory. It just
Okay.
came out, and it was talking about how when he was in Detroit and he met Stoney, I can't think of her name right now.
Sean Murphy.
Sean Murphy. He was selling something in the tickets for the show that she was in or something, and it was for a play that was going on in Detroit. And they said, you should come in and do it. And he says, well, I could do it. And he went in and did it. He got the audition just off the street. And is this during your time period? I mean, and then it's like the whole thing where he went to do the Broadway thing was during how that after that album got recorded, they were flying back and forth.
But that was after Hair.
Yeah, or that was that? I thought that was,
Was
Hair.
that before Hair?
I thought that was Hair that they were doing because him and Stoney were both doing it, and they got chosen for Hair. And then they were doing something in New York for the Broadway version of it.
Okay.
During the end of making of that album, it's in the booklet in there. It was interesting.
Yeah, she was in another group. It was the Wilson Moore Pursuit.
Yes.
She was lead singer.
It's a good booklet in that remaster there though. It's a cool record too. It has a whole album of her stuff in there.
She's an amazing talent.
Now, how far after that was after he left you guys, or how did that work out? I mean, was that within a year, or was that all the same time period?
Within the year, because a lot of times I base things upon where I was living. And I remember he came over, or he called me when I was living in my first apartment in Detroit and wanted to know if he could use a tune that we had written on that. And I was so mad at him that I wouldn't give him the tune, you know. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Did you do any records with the Horny Toads?
I did not record with the Horny Toads. Pete, and they did some session work. That band did not last a very long time. But shortly after that, within about a year and a half, I went on to work with Ted Lucas and a Detroit folk singer who's also no longer with us, named Jonathan Round. Johnny had a contract with Westbound Records. And so that was my connection, you know, in terms of getting to know Ted as a musician. Steve Fava, whose father was Joe Fava, the well-known classical guitarist with many books out about classical guitar, and a drummer named Danny Ballas were in that project. And we recorded an entire album that got shelved because there was some disagreement over writers' royalties.
Wow.
So many near misses.
Yes.
There was recently a friend of ours posted a picture of a limited edition self-printed album or small label album in Detroit called Detroit Folk Scene Volume 1, and Ted Lucas starts that whole thing.
Yep.
And then it goes into the guy that Andy Cohen, he's in there. He's near the end of it too.
Right.
And we just our sponsor, the Electric Kitsch, has helped us all get a copy of that just recently, and to get a listen to it, because there was never a volume 2. We're starting to get backstory on it and stuff. And
well, my hope is that someone will approach Armin Belady and try to purchase the masters for that unreleased album that we recorded and just release it. Teddy's getting a lot of coverage. I know a lot of people would love to hear Johnny again.
So there, it's sitting in. You have the album sitting in the vault somewhere then?
Oh, the record company owns the masters.
Who's that? What record company?
Westbound.
Westbound.
Wasn't that round record? Wasn't it like a weird shaped album cover? If I remember correctly.
You're talking about Johnny's album?
Yeah.
Well, that's
Jonathan
not
Round.
the one I re-recorded. It could have been an odd shape, yeah, or at least it gives a really strange appearance on his photograph. I'm not sure if the record
Maybe
itself
that's it.
is
I remember something about that album.
Yeah. He was a pretty talented guy. Rumor had it that that Mick Jagger said that his recording of "Sympathy for the Devil," I can never remember the title, was the best he'd ever heard. I don't know.
So he did a folk version of "Sympathy for the Devil."
You know, he was particularly dramatic. He was.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's on this lost album, or was that
No,
on another?
it might be on the album that Fred's talking
Okay.
about. With the
I'll have to
odd-shaped
look. I
photo-
can't remember.
Yeah, I wonder if that's on YouTube.
I think I've heard it.
Hell
I think
yeah.
it was on Deep Tracks on XM recently, because it played it, and I'm like, this. It was like super slowed down, and he speaks it almost. It was really strange. Yeah, I'm like, whoa, what version
what
is
is
this? I had no
that?
clue it was a Michigan.
Have you ever heard Ricky Lee version?
Jones?
Ricky Lee Jones version.
Possibly.
Anyway, totally different too.
It definitely wasn't
I gotta
her
seek
though.
out the one you're talking about.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't her. But yeah, that's cool.
Well, what happens after that, Susie? Did you just kind of gig solo, or?
Oh, I did a lot of solo gigs, and then for 4.5 to 5 years, I worked with something called the Dinner Theater of Detroit. And that was with a Detroit folkie named Phil Esser, who put together some of the local singers that he'd always really enjoyed hearing, and decided to do a local production of Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris, which was a...
I have that album.
Oh, you have the Jacques Brel album that they did? Yeah, Rosie Rizzo is the piano player on that album, because I had taken a hiatus. But so we did that show for 2.5 years, and then just before the bicentennial, they decided to put together a show by someone named Michael Peter Smith. He went on to not only write all the music for, but also star in the musical adaptation of the Tony-winning play The Grapes of Wrath, which ran on Broadway back in the 80s.
Oh,
Yeah. So we put together a show with Michael and his wife Barbara called Personals. And Personals ran for about 2.5 years in 2 different locations. That show actually was picked as Michigan's cultural representatives for the bicentennial. So we appeared on the Today Show live.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Pretty
now
fun.
this was a dinner theater, so people would have dinner and
Right. And we
enjoy
were
the
in the
musical?
basement of Mercy College, which was the local Catholic college. They were really supportive of the arts. We were there for 2.5 years. Took about a year off, and then moved to a club in the Plymouth Canton area called Vittorio's. And I don't even think the building's there anymore.
And you've continued in this vein through the years then? Or?
Oh, let's see. We've done country for 2.5 years. Country record I brought for you.
Oh,
I'll give it to you later, Fred.
okay.
Country for 2.5 years. Rock bands on and off through the years. More supper room. Lounge Lizard playing.
You just
Church
played
music.
a blues festival.
I did. Yeah. And I'm doing a taco fest on Saturday.
Oh.
Yeah, I often think, I came back from Clarksdale, Mississippi with a singer that I work with, a girl named Maggie McCabe. She's got just a really fine voice, and she wanted to drag me down to Clarksdale to do this event down there. So we're setting up and we're playing, and at the end of the show, the doorman comes over and he says to me, "I just want you to know," he said, "first of all, I'm a stride boogie woogie piano player." And I went, "Well, I'm not," in case it wasn't obvious to you. And he goes, "No," he says, "but listen, coming from me, this is a real compliment. You're an amazing cabaret player." And I thought, well, I suppose that's a good way to define the style, because I've never been able to pinpoint it. And, it's not really this, and it's not really that, and it's not really something else.
Well, you played in a wide variety of venues, so I guess, your style just kind of adapts to...
Yeah, you got to make it work however
That's
you
right.
can. Yeah.
I saw a picture somewhere. I don't know if it was in Bo White's book of a band that you and Pete had started, and you were dressed as clowns.
Is that in that book? I have to look at that book again.
I've seen it somewhere.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that was
I have it, a digital copy of it.
that was put together by our children's godmother and godfather, who were teachers in the Montrose school system, who decided that we should perform for kids in elementary schools. This is long before it became popular. So we decided we had to figure out a way to make it work. So he was Peter Paradiddle, and I was Sousaphone. And we did that for 4.5 years. Traveled throughout Ohio and Michigan and a little bit into Indiana.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there any recordings?
Oh, I hope not.
So you were just, this is geared toward what grade level would it be? Like
well,
lower elementary?
We played anywhere from kindergarten. We actually played a high school in Dearborn, which was rather frightening, but they were actually pretty responsive. We played some contemporary tunes, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to
but
say.
from back in the day. But I thought, oh no, somebody really put us in the wrong school. This is not high school quality material. But they had a great time. So.
Well, they got out of class. I mean,
That's probably it. Yeah,
that was a biggie.
Take a look at a club of clowns.
So
on
it was
stage.
just Pete on percussion and you on keyboards?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, give us a sample of what kind of songs were you performing?
Oh, we opened up with "Love Will Keep Us Together" by
Oh, Captain and Tennille,
Captain
right?
and Tennille, yeah. That type of thing. We did, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, that type of thing.
sure.
We did some kids' songs as well. Pete would come in with a big bass drum. Bam, bam, bam. That's it, making all kinds of racket. And I said, Pete, do you ever behave? Not very often, and it would go downhill from there. So.
What years was that?
1977 through 1981.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a good stretch. Wow.
yeah.
You told me once that your dad recorded in New Zealand.
Yeah,
He was on some hit records, or
quite a number of them. There's actually, the last time I did some research I'm not sure if it's Auckland or Wellington, there's one of the libraries has a number of his recordings in their, history of New Zealand jazz section. Yeah, I have the 78s that he recorded there. Yeah, I still have the
really?
78s. I did reach out to the son of the woman that he recorded with, a singer named Mavis Rivers. So she was Maori. And her son is living in Hawaii, but I got back a pretty standardized response, thank you for reaching out to us. Good to hear from you. Bye. So I don't think he actually saw the email. But yeah, he did. He had a number of hits, and they were going to come back from New Zealand. They had a record deal with RCA, and his band, typical musicians, decided they weren't coming back to the States. So he came back and got a job in radio, and a few years later, his piano player came back to work with George Shearing.
oh,
Yeah, they were fine players, and some of the live there's a live recording that I have that's pretty phenomenal.
because I told you I might have sent it to you. Your dad's on the cover of my next book.
I think you,
His trio.
yeah. You did send that to me. Yeah, that's with Kent
I had
Wilson.
to ask-
Bob McCullough,
Right.
and was it Kent?
No, this one's with, you told me the drummer.
yeah, Tony, not
Piskus or something.
Tommy Piskus, yeah. Do you remember the club he had out in Bay City?
I never went to it, but I do remember it.
It was in a house It was called The Apartment
The apartment lounge.
in the house.
Yeah, it was a house. It was
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Center Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom Piskus was a great drummer, and he and his brother owned that.
Okay. That became kind of notorious as I think it was a gay bar, or at least
Really?
later.
Well,
Okay.
it was rumored as. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, and I went there a few times. In fact,
Well, there
my
was a
buddy
closet
worked
as you
at,
walked in the front door. It was straight ahead of you. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You can cut that, please.
Let me take you back to Jim Atherton. Do you remember the big pot bust in Bay City that Jim was involved in?
No.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was.
When he was managing the band that they all lived in the house on.
Yeah, on the one way. Well,
Yeah.
it's now the one way going out of Bay City. What I can never
I
remember.
can't remember
Jenny?
either.
Jenny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was right almost on the corner of Jenny.
Wow.
And Mark Farner had been living there, and he moved out because they were dealing some marijuana,
Yeah.
and that's what led to the big bust.
Wow. Yeah,
But-
that I don't remember.
Did you and Pete or the band ever hang out at any of the Delta Promotion offices in Bay City? They had one in an old tire warehouse on Euclid, and then after the bust, Willard Kehoe, who was also one of the co-owners of Band Canyon, moved his Delta Promotions out to Tuscola Road.
Okay.
But you guys didn't ever go to either
No.
one of those places?
No, I don't. No, I don't remember that.
In the Meatloaf book, which I don't know how much of that was fantasy and how much was fact, but he talked about Rick Bozzo being offered to be the bassist in the band that
Grand
eventually became Grand Funk
Yeah.
Railroad.
That may be true.
Okay, but you don't have any direct knowledge of that.
No direct knowledge of that. But Ricky was a phenomenal player, is a phenomenal player, and would have had the personality to work well in that situation. He was often the tie that bound people together. He just had that.
Okay, yeah. I thought that was real interesting. That
Yeah, and then Mel Schracker.
yeah. Well, according to Meatloaf in his book, that Rick always kind of felt bad that he didn't take advantage of that. The way it turned out. I guess would have been a member of Grand Funk Railroad.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, he would have been at least comfortable financially. And
Well, yeah,
yeah.
although those guys got screwed just like so many
Oh, yes.
did over the years.
Yeah.
Have you stayed in contact with Rick Bozzo?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, a number of years ago, he came up, and so we hung out for a little bit and chatted, and I'm in touch with him on Facebook.
Yeah, same way.
Was
I'm
that
a
at
Facebook
White's
friend.
Bar? Because I got a lot of pictures of that. Somebody took and gave them to me.
yeah, but you also came out to the house in Freeland and hung, and
Okay.
The
yeah.
White Spar show was.
Not Freeland.
I opened up for Dick that night outside, and
Well, it was all outside. I
Yeah.
can't remember.
it was cool. Rick showed up because I'd heard about him when I worked with Dick all those years in the studio, and Don Richard was like, "Oh my gosh, Rick Boswell's here," and Lanny came down. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a crazy night, and we got a lot of photos. I got there's a ton of them.
Well, that picture of me at the table with Lanny and Dick.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember how exactly that happened. 'cause-
yeah, but you got the picture.
Yeah.
Was it
That was a
at
fun
White's?
day.
Yeah, it was at White's.
Oh, in the back, yeah.
It was probably that same day.
Yeah. Yep. That was the last time I got to jam. We didn't jam together, but I mean, open with him or spending some significant time. When Dick came back the final time to White's, I went to that too, and we got to catch up briefly. But
Do they still have the outdoor stage there? Are they using that in the summertime?
they had
Not
been,
this
but
year so far, no.
Okay.
There is outside events, but I don't know how it's been going. That would have been like 10 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
Rick
Yeah.
keeps posting the picture of me, Lanny, Don Richard, and Dick's manager, who that lady that keeps.
Oh, yeah, I can see her face.
Yeah,
Susan
Susan.
Michelson.
yeah, Susan. Yeah, There's a big photo, and I'm towering over him in the back of it all. But Rick
Well,
keeps
you
posting
just
it.
told me the name of because I don't know who gave me these pictures. Probably Anna Santino, but Don somebody.
Don Richard, yeah. He's Dick's right-hand man when
I didn't
Dick
know
was
who
in
that
SAG.
guy was.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, I had the opportunity to work with Dick,
Yeah.
which was pretty amazing. It was the strangest thing to stand on stage and to look to my right and see somebody that I had admired long before I played played an instrument myself professionally. So
Amazing.
yeah.
And that wraps up part 1 with Susie Woodman here at the MMHP in the 989. We'd like to thank her for coming on the show and being part of a huge Michigan rock lineage. Her Michigan music lineage is just tremendous for us, and to still have her come and discuss what she's done and been part of has been a tremendous value to us. We hope that you enjoyed the show and that you'll come back and join us for part 2 as we wrap up season 3 with Susie Woodman. Thank you.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, brought to you by Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, located both inside the Bay County Historical Museum on Washington Avenue, as well as Scotty's Sandbar on Evergreen Drive at the Bay City Middle Grounds.
On behalf of the hosts, Gary, Dr. J. Johnson, Sir Fred Rife, archivist and videographer Mike Beatty, and myself, this podcast wouldn't be here without Studio 163's Alan Garcia, the voice of MMHP, Mr. Eddie Switek, all of our guests, and you, the listeners.
You've been listening to the MMHP and the 989.